Hey, welcome everybody. I'm Ed Cruz and welcome to the last lesson. Today, what episode is this? I don't know. Is it 10 or 11? 11, whatever. Whatever last number I have set up. Because some of these videos I do it in chunks and I do it and I have it set already. So I think 8, 9, 10, maybe 11, okay? But regardless of what episode it is, I'll have it listed on there. This is further looking at understanding Yichikimima. I know I've talked about it a ton of times, but guess what? The reality is your stance sucks. So let's talk about it a little bit more and let's make sure we understand exactly why we're doing certain things regarding the stance, okay? So, first and foremost, with the stance, a lot of the things you got to remember, and this is just to reiterate some of the things I've talked about in the past, is that what you do in the very beginning of the stance, you have to maintain. It's almost like here, do this first, remember it, do this first, maintain it, do this next, maintain this, this, and this, and you're stacking it on with each other, one after another. And it seems like, 4 steps to really open up the stance isn't that difficult, but the problem is, once you get the understanding of what you're trying to do, it's not something that you can physically just say to yourself, okay, maintain this tension, control your center of gravity, and so forth. So let's look a little bit back into the stance and make sure we review a lot of the things that are so important for us to remember. Okay, when we do the stance, we have the heels together, right? The feet slightly apart, hands to the side, standing straight, butt's a little clench. And from here, you feel a little bit top heavy, okay? You don't want to exaggerate anything. Everything is a bit normal. It's just normal tension. You're not standing at an army salute of tension, just a natural tension like this, not like this, okay? So that very beginning part where you open up just like that, it's not even the beginning part, it's actually the ready position for it. You want to make sure you feel the center of gravity, right? It's not like a lot of misunderstanding with the Yichikimima is like, after I do this move, I'm going to feel the center of gravity, and at the very end, then I can really find my center of gravity. No, from the very beginning, when you start opening here, you feel your center of gravity as you stand up straight. And from here, you should feel basically the weight from the heel to the ball of the foot, generally in the middle, right? That's what you're hoping to achieve, and evenly in between. So if you picture a circle, picture a dot, it's exactly where it should be. This sensation is not something that you're trying to force and hold. I think that's a lot of times what people have the confusion is. That if you're in the center, it should always stay in the center. There's going to be adjustments because there's movement that's happening. And just like a car, even if you're driving it straight, you're not forcing the car to stay straight, you're making slight adjustments to that. And the overall look of that is what? Control, 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 control of your center of gravity. Control and awareness of your center of gravity actually would be more complete. So with that being said, we're standing here. Everything that I mentioned, something should be simple. And then we do the motion in its entirety. So the first motion that we've talked about before has a crossover, left over right, so we don't crush the heart. We flip it over, right, to open up, and then we chamber back. This initial motion, right, where we're top heavy in the beginning, this first motion crosses the chest in, okay? It actually, this cross basically creates this chest to sink in. This second motion, where you actually expand further, completes the full motion of the chest sinking in and actually making the belly get bigger. So right now you're standing center of gravity, and the reversal is from center of gravity, moving it all the way down to your belly. That's the reason for you doing your first motion, okay? So still having awareness of your center of gravity, you're doing this motion, doing a flip, and then you chamber it back. Now when you chamber it back, I think a lot of times people forget the significance of the chambering back, because once they complete this motion of sinking the chest in and making the belly big, they reopen it back up. Well, in fact, when you do this, my chest is caved in, my belly's big, and I pull back. And notice when I pull back, I'm not pulling back in this manner right here. I'm pulling back in this manner where it's like a triangle formation, okay? I'm not exaggerating it too much, but just basically a chamber here, pull back. Now, it matters also when you do this that the fist motion that you have has a slight turn. Why does it have a slight turn? With this slight turn, right, this motion here, if you imagine my thumbs going like this, just a little amount, basically locks in the position, okay? Here it's just here, and a lot of people don't pull it back enough. Here is okay, but you gotta have that lock-in position so the actual in the very beginning, the arm actually connects to the body. You'll also be parallel to the side, and you won't look like this, you'll be a little bit like this. Now, the end result of pulling this back and actually chambering it back, and this is sinking, right? Those shoulders are stretching, the elbows are sinking from this, is you're gonna feel this tension in the back of the neck area, okay? And what you're hoping to feel is that tension, and you want to maintain that tension from the first motion. So everything that you're doing, yes, you're making the chest go sink in, you're making the belly get big, the head's pulling up and the chin's going down. The end result of that first motion is simply that tension in the back. So imagine someone pinching you, or like a dog, mother dog grabbing their puppy by the back of the neck. You want to feel that tension exist at that point on, okay? So make sure throughout that whole motion, center of gravity is still in place. Chest is caved in, belly's big. Stretch, sink the elbows and shoulders. And then from here, you feel that tension, okay? After you make the next motion that occurs, the second motion is simply the knees bending. But the knees bending requires a little bit more explanation, because you don't simply bend the knees. You got to go to the source that leads to the bend of the knees. And that actually controls it is actually from here, that hip tuck in, that roll in motion. If you can remember this tension from the back of the neck, that roll in motion basically says from here, straighten the spine out, okay? So you gotta remember, I always use this example, best example possible that you can give. You're at the edge of the seat, you wanna sit on it, just a little amount, and it'll push out the L4, L5 area back here and straighten out the spine. Once you straighten that out, you wanna maintain that tension all the time, okay? The only way, in the beginning, you're aware of it, you think about it, you're exposed to that idea, but you got to practice it over and over again to maintain that tension without thought, okay? We'll go and dive into that a little bit later, okay? So, just wanted to check the time there. So, the hips tucking in creates a tension, but notice that creates a knee bend. And notice my knee bend's just natural, right? I'm not forcing myself to sink too much down. Even from the side perspective, I'm not forcing it down. Just a little hip tuck in. And notice my center of gravity still adjusts and maintains that point in the middle, okay? Once you do that, right, now we're gonna open up. The opening up, still maintaining the straight up, and we shift off the heels, open up, right? Open up in this manner. When you open up, you're basically, if you can imagine, center of gravity doesn't mean you stay exactly in center. There's a grace period moving forward and back. So this aspect, right, of it is basically here, you go to the limits of the grace period on the back. You don't want to lean back, or you don't want to stick your butt back from it. You still want to maintain that straightness out of it, and you want to maintain it open in this manner, right? This is the maximum that you can do it. And notice this natural motion, you're not forcing the sink to go happen, it's just a natural bend from here. I'm not going 1, 2, sinking further. From here, this motion here, 1, 2. I'm not sinking, right? I'm not sinking that motion. You already sunk the motion from the second technique. So don't think open stance, dig further down. That is not correct. It's just a natural looking stance when you do that. So when you open it, right? A third motion, when I open it, control that center of gravity, so the back of the heel. Then the fourth one is basically, I'm gonna open it again. The center of gravity now goes to the maximum to the front, right? Because the ball of the foot is now where you're shifting it to do it. And then at that point, it's still within the grace period if you control it, and you should be opening up just like this. So it looks like this in general, right? One motion, right? 2, 3, 4, right? And by this time, by you open it, if you do it correctly, you should just, oh, I'm already here. If you don't do it correctly, you may be too wide, you may be too tall, or you may fidget around and you haven't had it. It's okay to do that, but you want to get to the point where you're open 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're ready in the stance. That's what you're looking for. That's what you're feeling for. The main goal basically is maintain the stretch and have the awareness for the center of gravity. What I do want to talk about though, is the concept though is that we always talk about the stretch, right? But we have to look at it from the ground up perspective, as far as base support from the feet all the way up to this point. The connection is basically the knees. So yes, the tucking controls the bend of the knees, but you yourself have to have the awareness of the right amount of tension on the knees. So a lot of times you're like, okay, from the ground up, you're looking at the two sides supporting you up here. It's not the other way where you're dangling and then you're trying to put your feet like here, down here. You're looking at, if I'm looking at two sides trying to control the center of gravity from that point on. Now you don't have to fidget back and forth with the weight to see if you're actually forward or back, up and down. As long as you've got this straight tension, you should be okay. The only awareness that you really need to have is just the right amount of pinch of tension. Not that I'm squeezing in my legs, all right? It's actually going in this direction. But just like here, if I'm relaxed, right? The knees are sort of popped out. You want to have it at the right angle where, okay, here, even if I relax it, the knees won't pop out. Even if I relax it, it's still maintaining it without me using any form of muscle that's not necessary to hold that position, right? Structure means if it's aligned properly, it will hold that position. If I'm like this, my knees are pointing out like this. If I'm like this, I'm forcing it in, it feels tight. Just the right amount has that tension, and now all of a sudden, when I have this, my center of gravity is fully controlled and it feels solid, right? You have to ease it down because a lot of times you'll be using muscle that you won't necessarily need to do it in the beginning. So eventually, like, let's say, oh, I open up my center of gravity, feels everything's good. Just kind of breathe, right? Just kind of breathe. Just kind of from here be, maintain where you are, breathe and let it go and sink down, if you can see that. Once you do that, then you'll be like, everything kind of just settles down and chills out and falls to the floor. Now, practicing it is not a difficult process because the way to practice this is to simply stand, stand, stand. Okay, you gotta stand, okay? People are like, well, why am I standing? Well, what's the point of doing Silum Tao and stuff like that? The purpose of the stance, which most people don't know, is the stretch. To hold the stretch, you can't tell yourself stretch, stretch, stretch. Standing in Silum Tao, maintaining that stretch is pivotal to having a solid stance. You don't have to do this. Seriously, you don't have to do this. But if you don't do this, your stance is shit. That's just the reality of it. But, you know, to each his own, right? The reason for this is to have a solid stance. Otherwise, you'll notice that your stance will waver back and forth. You can't keep telling yourself in a row, keep the stretch, keep the stretch, keep the stretch, maintain your center of gravity. By standing over and over again, long periods of time and practicing it, you'll naturally have the stretch. And then in time, when you move around, your center of gravity will be in place. Okay, hopefully that's a kind of like a quick review. Maybe I'll just call that a Yichi Kim amount. Let's talk about it, chat about it. Episode 11, I believe, is probably the right amount. So hopefully that'll help you out, help you in your focus. And any questions, just ask. All right.